Adetiloye Aiyeola, Chief Visionary Officer, Awesome Continental, is right here with me. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Perpetual. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right. So, while President Bola Tinubu highlighted priority areas in the 2025 budget, he talked about how that food security, is not negotiable. And then he also talked about other things, saying they are taking bold steps to ensure that every Nigerian, can feed basically conveniently, and that no citizen will have to go to bed hungry. How did you receive that?
Absolutely. Food is a right, and no citizen has to go hungry. That is very, very important, to know. And I'm glad that the government is starting to pay much attention to what our food security should be like, what our food architecture should be like in the country. Absolutely nobody has to go hungry, and then, we're really glad that they are starting to pay that much needed attention.
Right, and looking at this allocation, really, we're looking at an over 100% increase from 362.94 billion naira in 2024 and 228.4 billion naira in 2023. And we're also seeing capital allocations rising by 130% compared to last year. Talk to us. What does this mean to you? Do you think that this is the government actually, doing the right thing, basically?
Well, I think that, it's really laudable that they are paying attention and increasing the budget that goes into agriculture. However, it is still not enough. You could check that it's not just only about now even spending more. It's about spending smartly. Agriculture and food security is beyond farming. It also includes infrastructural development. It also includes development of trade, roads to market, development of distribution network, storage, logistics, etc. I do not see that the 2% allocated, even though it's a significant increase from last year's budget, I do not think that it's going to get us to that promised land of no citizen ever going hungry. I think there is still lots of work that needs to be done. I think there's lots of, the budget is falling short of the Maputo declaration of 10% of GDP budget allocation for agriculture. It's really falling below that. I don't see us develop, our agro-industrial base on this budget basis.
Well, looking at what you just talked about, developing the agro-industrial base, is that left to the government alone? What about, maybe private sector or even the people who are involved in this business? Agriculture is also business, whether we like it or not. We're not just going to see it as a development, a developmental issue.
Yes.
What do you think about that? Should we look at, should we put everything, on the table of the government?
Absolutely not. Agriculture, still is largely a wealth creation engine of the Nigerian economy. It not just only provides significant employment to more than 70% of our workforce, especially for the rural areas, but it also contributes significantly to our GDP, right? So we need to really look at agriculture from the perspective of efficiency and effectiveness as business. There are lots of private sector players that are really involved in or are very interested in coming into the agricultural market. However, when they see the lack of infrastructure, something that only the government can provide, it allows them really think about it. Again, it's a business decision. Will I want to go into a business when I know that it could likely result to a loss? I definitely wanted to shy away from certain area or that types of business. And so that's one of the reasons why we actually need the government in order to really fix the fundamental problems of agriculture, e.g., logistics and storage infrastructure, road and good distribution network. Really combat the feeling of insecurity, especially for remote rural areas. I think that these are, what the government largely has to, really put in place before we can see, that we can reach that promised land of no Nigerian going hungry. But really, the private sector has the major work to be done in really building and developing that agricultural base. And I think that we're just really actually looking for the government to create that right ecosystem for us to thrive.
All right, well, the government talked about mechanization, talking about irrigation, talking also about value chain development. I want to believe maybe some of the things you mentioned are also lumped up in that, or what do you think?
Well, absolutely. again, like I mentioned in my earlier discussion, it's not really about spending more, right? We need to really spend wisely. And wisely, when you talk about wisely, it also involves things like the post-harvest operations. And I'm singularly grateful for this government, because now they're starting to pay attention to what we've always been talking about. Recently, I mean previously, the emphasis really on food production, food production, food production. I don't think that we have a production problem in Nigeria. We have a food distribution problem, and there has to be that that attention to that much in the details. I look forward to a Nigeria where the government and all the stakeholders involved can actually pull their weight to ensure that we have a more industrialized agricultural food system. That is what can actually lift Africa or Nigeria out of poverty.
Well, talking about a more industrialized agricultural space, the government seems to be interested, in working on this. What are your recommendations? What are the steps to be taken? I mean, maybe I should just say some of the things that the government is talking about. They are talking about mechanization, which I've mentioned earlier. Yes. They're also talking about some of the things they want to do for farmers, whether it is the fertilizer distribution. They are also talking about certain loans that they want to give in that sector. Looking at all of these things, they're talking about exchanges also, and so many things they want to do. Do you think all this can actually get us there, or are there other actions that should be taken?
I believe more attention needs to be paid to what happens after harvest. This is very critical. I mean, I know the government does a lot to support food production and farmers, but I think that this is the right time to actually support the other players in the value chain, including aggregators, food processors, and logistics service providers. I think that there has to be more investment in storage. I have not seen that quickly defined, but we need to be able to have a robust storage.
How capital intensive is that?
Well, it is actually very capital intensive when you look at cold logistics infrastructure, for instance. We've got to have significant cold storage facilities that can actually produce more in the glut season. We also need to have good logistics in place. What's the point of having harvested good quality products? You've harvested tomatoes on the farm, and it cannot, maybe 1,000 kilometers away, and it cannot get to Lagos successfully because maybe the roads are bad, or maybe something happens, maybe the multiple taxations on the road, levies, as you go. It's really those are the things that really affects us. People say that food processing is actually the way to actually mitigate post-harvest loss, and I agree. However, in the case of Nigeria, where the processing capacity is really a significant distance away from the production sites, you'll find out that a lot will still be lost on its way to being processed.
Maybe we should move those processing companies or facilities closer to the farms. So what stops us from doing that?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that as stakeholders in this place, even private sectors, we're starting to look at that. But you have to consider that when doing that, there is also the security analysis that needs to be done. How safe is investing and putting a processing plant in this community? That's also a big question that needs to be answered.
All right, so in closing, talk to us. What's your outlook for the agricultural sector? Well, and maybe you should also talk about what the private sector should also be doing while the government is doing all of this.
Well, absolutely. I think that at the end of the day, it really lies in the hands of all of us business people in this agricultural space. We need to really pay attention to how to really harness the agricultural potential and opportunity that we have. We have the ability to actually produce at very low cost and actually do a lot of exportation. We need to also look at how we can export services, not just only product, but manufacturing, licensing, our human potential services. We in Nigeria have developed that, that service capacity that we can even export to our neighboring African countries. I think at the same time, we need to approach agriculture from a business perspective. Agriculture is more of a business than a way of life, quotes. And we have to be able to bring in strong business culture into agriculture, and that's one of the things that we at Post-Harvest Africa are addressing. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Adetiloye, for your time on the show today. We do appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.